This is like the creepiest guy I've never heard of. I appreciate the narrative of his story. I appreciate the fact that this woman rose up and came back to life, but what was he doing with her corpse in the first place? Hello guys, so it's currently a bit of a dreary and dreary afternoon outside. It's technically the middle of summer, but traditional British weather, very changeable. It's really cold out there and quite kind of overcast. It looks like it's going to rain. So I've got myself a cup of coffee and a Bakewell tart, and I'm just going to sit upstairs and go through some old books, and specifically some poetry books. So many years ago, I was visiting a friend up in Stirling in Scotland, and we ended up in Stirling Bookshop, and it was one of these really old tumble down bookshops where you're kind of crawling along the shelves and there's dusty piles of books everywhere. Everything good about an old-fashioned bookshop. And I was browsing the poetry section when I came to a whole collection of beautiful little books with a little bit of gold detail on the cover. They were called the Canterbury Poetry Collection, I think, or the Canterbury Poets. And basically they were little collections of all of the really famous British poets, Byron, Shelley, I think Keats is in there. And I was just really drawn to them, and I noticed that they're sort of published at different publication dates. They all look like they come from the same collection, but some are sort of 1885, 1886, I think there's one 1884, but they're all sort of from around the mid-1800s, and they've just been sitting downstairs on top of the piano for a few years. So I thought what I'd do is I'd go through them and tell you a little bit about each of the poets, and maybe read my favourite poem, or, you know, a poem from each one of the books, just to give you kind of a flavour of each of these different British poets. Growing up, I loved poetry, a huge Christina Rossetti fan. If you've ever read Anger Reachner, you'll probably know that. Byron, of course, Shelley, one of my favourites. You know, there are so many amazing old British poets, but I think the language puts people off a little bit nowadays, because some of it's quite hard to follow if you haven't sort of grown up reading it. So I thought I'd try and share the ones that I really like, and the ones that I think people can probably relate to, just to showcase who they were and what they wrote. So pour yourself a cup of coffee, grab yourself a Bakewell tart or something sweet to eat, and let's dive in. Okay, so the first one that I've picked up is Edgar Allan Poe. And he is pretty much Gothic rock star royalty. He is very famous for having written a poem called The Raven, which I'm not going to read out, but I will read the first stanza, because when you hear it, you might recognise it. It's very famous. So it goes, let's have a quick sip of coffee. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping on my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. "Only this, and nothing more." And it carries on. It's this poem, long poem about a raven who keeps croaking out, "Nevermore, nevermore." And yeah, it's quite famous. But he is famous for a whole host of other reasons. Most notably, if you've got Netflix, go check out Fall of the House of Usher, because Fall of the House of Usher is one of his short stories, and he wrote a lot of short stories, and Netflix did a stunning adaptation, really dark and gory, very good. But the other thing that he wrote, which has more of a direct impact on my writing, was a short story called The Red Death, or Masque of the Red Death. Now, I am a huge Phantom of the Opera fan, and probably my most successful book was a prequel to that called Those Rosy Hours. And, you know, even if you watch the Andrew Lloyd Webber film adaptation, you will see that the Phantom dresses up as the Red Death when he enters the masquerade ball. And that comes directly from Poe and Poe's Masque of the Red Death. So that again is a short story that had a huge cultural impact on generations. So yes, that's Edgar Allan Poe, and actually Edgar Allan Poe isn't English. I thought all of these were English poets, but he's American, isn't he? Let me just check that. Yes, he was indeed American. I wasn't making that up. He died in 1849. But yes, culturally he's very well known, and I've picked out a very, very short piece by him called A Sonnet to Science. So have a listen to this and see if it resonates.
Science, true daughter of old time thou art, who alterest all things with thy peering eyes. Why preyest thou thus upon the poet's heart? Vulture, whose wings are dull realities. How should he love thee, or how deem thee wise, who wouldst not leave him in his wanderings, to seek for treasure in the jewelled skies, albeit he soared with an undaunted wing? Hast thou not dragged Diana from her car, and driven the Hamadryad from the wood to seek a shelter in some happier star? Hast thou not torn the Naiad from her flood, the Elfin from the green grass, and from me the summer dream beneath the tamarind tree?
So yes, I find this a really interesting short little poem, because I think it's something, even though he was writing this in the 1800s, I think it's something that a lot of artists still feel concerned about even to this day, because what he's talking about is how science has sort of usurped the mystical and the magical and the creative. This sort of idea that science seeks to explain everything, but in doing so you sort of kill the beauty in certain things. So he's talking about things like Diana, who was the goddess of the moon, Hamadryads, which were spirits of the trees, Naiads, which were spirits of water and wells. And, you know, they're all having to pack up and go off and find somewhere else to live as science kind of destroys the imaginative worlds in which they live. I don't know. I think he would have liked Einstein, because Einstein was a man of absolute science who attributed a lot of his ability for abstract thinking to his mother telling him fairy tales. So he was a man who both combined science and magical thinking and mythology. He came out with some incredible things, like if you want your children to be intelligent, read them fairy tales. If you want them to be more intelligent, read them more fairy tales. And that sort of sense of wonder that Poe is talking about and sort of accusing science of having usurped, Einstein went the other way, and he kind of said that science had given him this sense of wow, you know, when you just stand there and you look at the universe and the mystery of the universe. He didn't feel that science had taken away that sense of awe and wonder. He felt that science had added to it for him. So I don't know, which side of the coin do you come down there? Are you like Poe? Do you feel that science is killing imagination and creativity? Or are you like Einstein and you feel that it kind of adds to the amazement and wonder of the universe? I don't know, I'm kind of in between. I see it from both sides, because even though we know how the sun and the moon work and, you know, how planets orbit each other and all of that, I still look up the stars and go, wow, you know. But at the same point, as much as I would never try to lessen science or its influence in any way, it can be a bit of a buzzkill when it comes to sort of mythological and paranormal creepy stuff that we all enjoy, even though we know it might not be real. So yeah, I don't know. What do you think? Right, so the next one that we've got here is Blake. Now, Blake was English. He was from Soho in London. And very much like Poe, he had a signature poem. So I think every poet has got this one poem that everybody knows them for. So with Poe, it was The Raven. With Blake, it was The Tiger. And he had a very, very famous poem that went, "Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry?" I think. But the minute that you start reeling off those first two, "Tiger, tiger, burning bright," everybody knows that. Nobody knows the rest of the poem. Everybody knows that bit. But again, I'm not going to go with tiger today. I'm going to go with a poem called The Garden of Love, which sounds a little bit flowery, but it's not, because Blake has a really dark side to him. I'm going to do a different video on revenge poetry, because I love a good dark poem, like a real sort of boomf, sort of angry poem. And he did a brilliant one, which I will include in that video, but he didn't like organised religion very much, which makes me like him more. But this one is sort of an interesting poem, which I think you could read it many different ways. But it's called The Garden of Love, and it goes like this.
I laid me down upon a bank, where love lay sleeping. I heard among the rushes dank, weeping, weeping. Then I went to the heath and the wild, to the thistles and thorns of the waste, and they told me how they were beguiled, driven out and compelled to be chaste. I went to the garden of love, and saw what I never had seen. A chapel was built in the midst, where I used to play on the green. And the gates of this chapel were shut, and "Thou shalt not" writ over the door. So I turned to the garden of love, that so many sweet flowers bore, and I saw it was filled with graves, and tombstones where flowers should be, and priests in black gowns were walking their rounds, and binding with briars my joys and desires.
So yes, I find that really interesting, because it's got such a flowery title, The Garden of Love. It's like, oh, it's going to be about lilies and flowers and things. And then you get into it and it's like all of these sort of flowers that didn't quite fit into this ideal garden of love. So the spiky ones, it says the thistles and thorns of the waste, you know, they've all been banished from the garden of love. If they're a little bit too prickly and they don't fit in, they've been banished. And this beautiful garden where he used to run around completely unimpeded and, you know, non-self-conscious, has suddenly been kind of closed down, and there's now this great big church in the middle of it, and all of these priests wandering around saying "Thou shalt not," and killing any joy that once there was in the garden of love, and restricting everybody's frivolity and enjoyment, which is sort of what organised religion does tend to do. So yeah, I find it an interesting kind of comment. And binding with briars my joys and desires. I don't think that needs much more explanation, does it? Yeah, by all accounts, he was a bit of a mystic. So he was a believer, I think, in Christian religion or Christian beliefs, but in angels and spirituality, but not in organised religion. And I think that, again, a bit like Poe, that's a sentiment that I think a lot of people can relate to in the modern world. So a lot of what they talk about is very relatable still today. So next up, we've got Shelley. And Percy by Shelley was a very big name in English poetry. He was good friends with Lord Byron, mad, bad and dangerous to know, and we will get onto him a bit later. But he was also married to Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein, which was a really, really big deal at the time because, you know, mostly women had to change their names if they wanted to get themselves published. She didn't change her name. I don't think she did. Or if she did, she changed it back to Mary at some point. And she got a lot of criticism because everybody went, a woman couldn't possibly write anything this dark. It must have been her husband. Percy must have written Frankenstein, which is a bit of a shit line to take, really, but that's what happened in those days. So anyway, full disclosure here, Shelley is my favourite, and I'm about to read a really long poem. Not a really long one, not like The Witch of Atlas. He wrote some amazingly long poems. Witch of Atlas is one of them. And he's not everybody's cup of tea, because this is just a nice poem. I'm going to read you my favourite poem, and it's just called The Cloud, and it's just a poem about a cloud. You know, I like him for that reason. Is he wrote some very long pieces, like The Witch of Atlas, but you couldn't really accuse him of following a narrative arc. You know, he wasn't all about this hero's journey. You know, there wasn't really this big beginning, middle and end, you know, or hugely important point. And at one point, I think at the beginning of Witches of Atlas, he has a little go at his wife, because his wife's been having a go at him, saying, you know, where's your narrative structure here? Where's like your whole story? What's the point of this poem? And he's like, you know, back off, woman, you know, there doesn't need to be any point to this. So that's why I like Shelley, because he wrote poems because he liked nice words, and I like nice words, and he just put a lot of nice words together and created poems that I think are nice. So let me read you my favourite. It's called The Cloud. There's not a lot else to say about that. The interesting thing, this was published in 1884, so pretty much exactly 20 years after he died, and it was really sad actually, because he was on a boat and he fell off it and drowned. And that was the end of Percy Shelley. So a bit of a shock for everybody involved, because he was really young at the time. Okay, so I was going to say he was 21. He wasn't. He was 29 when he died, which is still young. Still in his 20s. And so, yeah, let's read the poem.
I bring fresh showers for the thirsting flowers from the seas and the streams. I bear light shade for the leaves when laid in their noonday dreams. From my wings are shaken the dews that waken the sweet buds every one, when rocked to rest on their mother's breast as she dances about the sun. I wield the flail of the lashing hail and whiten the green plains under, and then again I dissolve it in rain and laugh as I pass in thunder. I sift the snow on the mountains below, and their great pines groan aghast, and all the night 'tis my pillow white, while I sleep in the arms of the blast. Sublime on the towers of my skiey bowers, lightning my pilot sits. In a cavern under is fettered the thunder, it struggles and howls in fits. Over the earth and ocean with gentle motion this pilot is guiding me, lured by the love of the genii that move in the depths of the purple sea. Over the rills and the crags and the hills, over the lakes and the plains, wherever he dream, under mountain or stream, the spirit he loves remains. And I all the while bask in heaven's blue smile, whilst he is dissolving in rains. The sanguine sunrise, with his meteor eyes, and his burning plumes outspread, leaps on the back of my sailing wrack when the morning star shines dead. As on the jag of a mountain crag, which an earthquake rocks and swings, an eagle alit one moment may sit in the light of its golden wings. And when sunset may breathe from the lit sea beneath its ardours of rest and of love, and the crimson pall of eve may fall from the depths of heaven above, with wings folded I rest on mine airy nest, as still as a brooding dove. That orbed maiden, with white fire laden, whom mortals call the moon, glides glimmering o'er my fleece-like floor, by the midnight breezes strewn, and wherever the beat of her unseen feet, which only the angels hear, may have broken the woof of my tent's thin roof, the stars peep behind her and peer, and I laugh to see them whirl and flee, like a swarm of golden bees, when I widen the rent in my wind-built tent, till calm rivers, lakes and seas, like strips of the sky fallen through me on high, are each paved with the moon and these. I bind the sun's throne with a burning zone, and the moon's with a girdle of pearl. The volcanoes are dim, and the stars reel and swim, when the whirlwinds my banner unfurl. From cape to cape, with a bridge-like shape, over a torrent sea, sunbeam-proof, I hang like a roof, the mountains its columns be. The triumphal arch through which I march, with hurricane, fire and snow, when the powers of the air are chained to my chair, is the million-coloured bow. The sphere fire above its soft colours wove, while the moist earth was laughing below. I am the daughter of earth and water, and the nursling of the sky. I pass through the pores of the ocean and shores. I change, but I cannot die. For after the rain, when with never a stain, the pavilion of heaven is bare, and the winds and sunbeams, with their convex gleams, build up the blue dome of air, I silently laugh at my own cenotaph, and out of the caverns of rain, like a child from the womb, like a ghost from the tomb, I arise and unbuild it again.
So yeah, I haven't really got much to say about that. It's not a particularly cutting poem. It's not a particularly thought-provoking poem. It's just a really pretty poem. And I always thought that last bit about, I am the daughter of earth and water, the nursling of the sky. I pass through the pores of the ocean and shores. I change, but I cannot die. I always thought that would make a really nice epitaph, like on a gravestone. Like, yeah, because that's what we are. We're passing through life, and we change. But you cannot kill energy. Energy can change form, but it cannot die. So, yeah, I don't know. It appeals. Okay, so now we're into uncharted territory for me. Owen Meredith. And this one's interesting because the other ones all have dates in it, but this doesn't seem to have a publication date. So I'm not entirely sure, but it's around the same time, I think. But I did have to look this one up because I actually don't know Owen Meredith. And what it says is, Owen Meredith is the pen name of somebody called Edward Robert Bulwer Lytton. Bloody hell, that's a name, isn't it? Edward Robert Bulwer. Is that how you say it? B-U-L-W-E-R. Bulwer Lytton. Lytton. Flipping hell. I see why he changed his name. But anyway, he was alive from 1831 to 1891. And it says he was an English poet, diplomat and politician. So a poetic politician. This could be interesting. And apparently his father was a famous novelist, Edward Bulwer Lytton, who wrote such bangers as The Last Days of Pompeii. So I don't know. I do not know this. Oh, I think I'm going to like him. I just opened a page at random and the first thing that came up is The Vampire. Oh my goodness me. Yeah, I think we're going to get on famously. I think, yeah. Right, give me a minute. I'm going to have a little look through and pull something that I like. Oh my goodness. So I started reading The Vampire, right? Get a load of this, right? I found a corpse, good start, with glittering hair of a woman whose face, though dead, the white death in it had left still fair, too fair for an earthly bed. It gets better. So I'm going to read this one. I love this man.
I found a corpse with glittering hair of a woman whose face, though dead, the white death in it had left still fair, too fair for an earthly bed. So I loosened each fold of her bright curls, rolled from forehead to foot in a gush of red gold, and kissed her lips till her lips were red, and warm and light on her eyelids white I breathed, and pressed unto mine her breast, till the blue eyes opened, and the breast grew warm. And this woman, behold, arose up bold, and, lifelike lifting a wilful arm, with steady feet from the winding sheet, stepped forth to a muttered charm. And now, beside me, whatever betide me, this woman is night and day, for she cleaves to me so that, wherever I go, she is with me the whole of the way, and her eyes are so bright in the dead of the night that they keep me awake with dread, while my lifeblood pales in my veins and fails, because her red lips are so red that I fear 'tis my heart she must eat for her food, and it makes my whole flesh creep to think she is drinking and draining my blood unawares, if I chance to sleep.
Well, isn't he a regular little Sheridan Le Fanu? I was not expecting that. That is really entertaining. So yeah, I mean, it does sound a little bit like he's trying to get off with a corpse at the beginning of this. I'm not sure you should be fondling the breasts of a dead woman. But, you know, I mean, she came back to life. Possibly not because of the fondling, but yeah, she came back to life. I appreciate the narrative of his story. I appreciate the fact that this woman rose up and came back to life and is now stuck to him and sucking his blood. But what was he doing with her corpse in the first place? That's the only question I've got. The only question. And possibly that was his own fault. I'm going to take this man aside and read a lot more of what he's written, because I think this is an absolute hidden gemstone. I love a good dark poem. This is like the creepiest guy I've never heard of. Okay guys, I've really enjoyed doing this, but as I've started doing it, I've suddenly realised that, you know, I've got a lot of poetry books here and we've only got through 4 of them. And in order to keep these videos to a sensible length that people might actually watch, I think I'm going to split them up. So I'm going to stop for now and we shall come back and continue later down the line with a few more of these poets. But let me know which one was your favourite. Let me know if you liked any of them or you didn't like any of them. And, you know, if you've got a poet that you prefer, let me know below.